The ice cream parlor fell completely silent. Every spoon froze midair. Every pair of eyes, white, black, and brown, turned toward the little girl standing at the counter. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached into her small pink backpack. The cashier, a blonde woman in her 40s with folded arms and a face tight as stone, frowned and took a cautious step back. "Ma'am, I already told you," she began, her voice sharp, but she never finished, because the black girl, no older than 10, pulled out something that made everyone gasp. The old man by the window dropped his cup. The teenagers in the booth stopped laughing. Even the manager, who had just come out of the back, froze in place. Nobody expected a child to pull out that. And in that tense, breathless moment, the girl looked up at them through tear-streaked eyes and whispered, "You didn't even let me explain." The crowd shifted uneasily, waiting for someone to say something. But before anyone could move, the story rewinds. Hours earlier, before the girl ever stepped into that ice cream shop, a gentle spring breeze danced through the small town of Maplewood. It was one of those calm Saturday afternoons when families crowded the park, kids rode their bikes down Elm Street, and the sweet smell of waffle cones floated through the air. At the edge of town stood Creamy Delights, the only ice cream shop for miles. Its pink and blue neon sign glowed cheerfully over the door, promising joy to anyone who walked in. Inside, pictures of smiling customers lined the walls, families laughing, friends hugging, and kids with ice cream mustaches. But one picture was missing. No one had ever seen a black child on that wall. On this particular afternoon, an old woman named Mrs. Evelyn Carter sat on the bench across the street, watching the world move. Her silver hair glistened under the sun, and her warm brown eyes followed every passerby. She'd lived in Maplewood for over 50 years and had seen its kindness and its coldness. She noticed the young girl long before anyone else did. The girl was small, about 10, wearing a faded yellow dress and white sneakers with scuffed toes. She walked carefully, clutching a few dollar bills in her hand. Her name was Amira Johnson. She had been saving her allowance for weeks, picking up cans, helping neighbors carry groceries, even washing her mom's car, to buy one thing she had never had before: her own ice cream cone from Creamy Delights. Mrs. Carter smiled softly as she watched Amira cross the street. "Go on, baby," she whispered. "You've earned it." Amira stepped into the parlor, her eyes lighting up at the rows of colorful ice cream tubs behind the glass. Mint green, strawberry pink, chocolate brown. Each one looked like a dream. The sweet smell of sugar and vanilla made her grin. She stood in line, clutching her money tightly. But as she reached the counter, the smiles around her began to fade. The woman behind the counter, Brenda, looked at Amira with a cold stare. Her voice was flat and dismissive. "Can I help you?" "Yes, ma'am," Amira said politely, her small voice full of excitement. "I'd like 1 scoop of cookies and cream, please." Brenda blinked, then leaned on the counter. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart?" Amira frowned. "Yes, ma'am. I have money." She held out her crumpled bills. Brenda didn't take them. Instead, she looked over Amira's shoulder at the next customer, a teenage boy wearing a baseball cap, and said, "What can I get for you?" The boy hesitated. Everyone around them noticed. Amira's smile began to fade. "Excuse me, I was next," she said quietly. Brenda's jaw tightened. "I think it's best if you wait outside, honey. We're out of your flavor." The shop was silent. The tubs behind the glass were full. Mrs. Carter, still sitting across the street, noticed the girl hadn't come out with ice cream. Her old heart stirred. Something wasn't right. Amira stood frozen, unsure what to do. The other customers whispered. Some looked away. One woman shifted uncomfortably and murmured, "She's just a kid, Brenda." But Brenda only snapped, "Mind your business." Amira's small hands shook as she looked down at the money she had worked so hard for. Her throat tightened. "I just wanted ice cream," she whispered. Then, she turned to leave. We share powerful stories that uncover hidden truths and challenge perspectives. Subscribe to stay updated, share to keep others safe, and comment where you're watching from. Outside, She sat on the curb, eyes brimming with tears. Cars passed by, and the world kept moving, but to Amira, everything felt still. The laughter from inside the shop echoed like an insult. Mrs. Carter slowly rose from the bench and crossed the street. Her cane clicked softly against the pavement. She sat beside Amira, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "What's wrong, baby?" "They said they're out of my flavor," Amira said, her voice trembling. Mrs. Carter frowned. "Out of your flavor? That's funny, because I just saw them serve a scoop of cookies and cream not 2 minutes ago." Amira wiped her nose. "They said I should wait outside." Mrs. Carter's kind eyes hardened. She had seen that look before, the one Brenda gave the girl. The same look people used to give her many years ago when she was refused service at a diner. "Listen to me, Amira," she said softly. "When people treat you wrong for no good reason, it says more about them than it ever will about you. You understand?" Amira nodded weakly. Mrs. Carter smiled. "Now, how about we go in there together?" But Amira shook her head. "I don't want to go back." Mrs. Carter thought for a moment, then patted her bag. "Then maybe I'll go in for you. You stay right here." She stood up, her frail frame straightening as she walked back toward Creamy Delights. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped in, her face calm but firm. Brenda looked up, startled. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes, you can," Mrs. Carter replied, her tone polite but steady. "I'd like 1 scoop of cookies and cream, and I'd like you to hand it to that little girl outside." The room went quiet again. Brenda's lips thinned. "That girl?" "She." Mrs. Carter cut her off sharply. "That child," she corrected. "And before you embarrass yourself any further, I suggest you remember that kindness doesn't cost a dime." Brenda hesitated, looking uncomfortable as other customers began to whisper. But instead of giving in, she crossed her arms and said, "Ma'am, I have the right to refuse service to anyone." Mrs. Carter's expression changed. She sighed deeply, as if she had seen this exact kind of ugliness too many times. "Yes, you do," she said, "but so does life, and it has a funny way of paying people back in full." Outside, Amira watched through the window, her heart pounding. She could tell something was happening. People inside were watching Mrs. Carter closely now. Some even seemed embarrassed. The old woman's voice carried through the shop as she turned toward the crowd. "Every one of you," she said, "has a choice, right now, to be decent or to be silent." The air in the shop grew thick. Then, just when the tension felt unbearable, Brenda slammed the scooper into the tub and said coldly, "We're closed." The crowd gasped. Mrs. Carter looked at her calmly. "Then you've closed your heart long before today." Brenda stormed off toward the back. Mrs. Carter turned and walked out, her steps slow but proud. She reached Amira, knelt beside her, and smiled sadly. "It's okay, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." Amira sniffled. "I just wanted ice cream." Mrs. Carter reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded card. "Then maybe it's time we show them something sweeter than ice cream." Amira looked confused. "What do you mean?" The old woman smiled mysteriously. "You'll see, sweetheart. You'll see." Hours later, as the sun dipped low and the shop lights flickered on again, Amira returned, this time alone. Her face was calm, her steps firm. She pushed open the door. The same people were there, the same woman behind the counter. Brenda turned and frowned. "You again? I told you." But before she could finish, Amira slowly reached into her pink backpack. Everyone froze. No one knew what she was about to pull out, and what came out next shocked them all. The moment Amira's hand disappeared into her backpack, the room held its breath. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stop spinning. Brenda stiffened behind the counter, her voice sharp but trembling. "Now, you better watch what you're doing, little girl." Amira didn't say a word. Her small fingers moved slowly inside the bag, and when she finally pulled them out, what she held made everyone's eyes widen. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't money either. It was a small, handmade cardboard sign, colored with crayons and marker streaks, the kind of thing only a child could make. Across the top, in bold, shaky letters, it said, Kindness is free. And beneath it, glued carefully, were a few coins, a paper heart, and a photo of her and her mom smiling at a community picnic. Gasps rippled through the parlor. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Amira's lips quivered, but she stood tall. "My mom told me that no matter how people treat me, I should still be kind. I made this for school last week. But maybe you need it more than they did." She stepped forward, gently placing the sign on the counter. Brenda froze, her expression twisting, part confusion, part embarrassment. "What's this supposed to mean?" Amira met her eyes. "It means you shouldn't be mean just because someone doesn't look like you." The room stayed silent. A woman near the door whispered, "She's just a kid, Brenda." An old man by the window shook his head. "That's shameful, turning a child away like that." Brenda's cheeks flushed red. It wasn't about that. I just..." But no words could save her now. Everyone had seen it happen. Everyone had heard the tone in her voice when she told Amira to wait outside. Amira turned to leave, but before she could, the shop door swung open. Mrs. Carter stepped in. Her cane tapped against the floor as she walked toward Amira with calm, steady grace. "I thought I might find you here," she said softly. Amira looked up, relieved. "I wanted to show her my sign." Mrs. Carter smiled warmly. "You did the right thing, baby." Then she looked at Brenda. "Some people need reminders that hearts can melt faster than ice cream when kindness touches them." Brenda swallowed hard, not sure what to say. The tension in the shop eased slightly, but not for long, because just then, the shop door opened again. A man in a suit walked in. He was tall, with graying hair and kind blue eyes. He wore a badge that read Manager Thomas Whitaker. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Before Brenda could speak, Mrs. Carter said, "Your employee refused to serve this little girl because of the color of her skin." The words hung heavy in the air. Mr. Whitaker's expression darkened. "Is that true?" Brenda stammered. "Sir, that's not..." She was causing. But Amira interrupted gently. "I just wanted cookies and cream, sir. That was all it took." Mr. Whitaker walked around the counter, crouched to Amira's level, and said quietly, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. You never should have been treated that way." He stood up, glaring at Brenda. "This is not how we treat customers here. Not in my store." Brenda's face turned pale. "I was just..." "You're done for today," he said sharply. "Go home." Brenda froze, realizing the weight of her actions. She grabbed her purse and left without another word. As the door shut behind her, the shop seemed to breathe again. Mr. Whitaker turned to Amira with a gentle smile. "What flavor did you want again?" Amira hesitated. "Cookies and cream." He nodded and scooped a big swirl of it into a cone, topping it with rainbow sprinkles. "On the house," he said, handing it to her. Her eyes widened. "For free." He smiled. "For you? Always." The crowd in the shop began to clap softly. Some smiled. Others looked guilty for not speaking up sooner. Mrs. Carter wiped a tear from her cheek. "You did good, child," she whispered. But Amira didn't smile. Not yet. She turned back toward the counter and pointed to her cardboard sign. "Can you put that up there?" she asked. Mr. Whitaker looked at it and nodded. "Right next to the register." He carefully taped it up so everyone could see. The words "Kindness is free now" faced every customer who came in. Amira licked her ice cream and smiled finally, her heart lighter. But before they could leave, something unexpected happened. A young reporter who had been sitting in the corner, she had been quietly eating her ice cream while typing on her laptop, stood up. She approached Mrs. Carter and Amira. "Excuse me," she said gently. "My name's Leah Parker. I'm with the Maplewood Gazette. Would it be all right if I shared what happened here today?" Mrs. Carter raised an eyebrow. "What for?" Leah smiled softly. "Because people need to be reminded of what real courage looks like, and it's standing right in front of me." Amira looked unsure. "Will it make Brenda mad?" Leah knelt beside her. "It might. But it might also make a lot of people think before they judge someone." Mrs. Carter placed a hand on Amira's shoulder. "It's up to you, baby." Amira thought for a moment, then nodded. Okay, you can tell them, but make sure they know I wasn't trying to be mean. Leah smiled. I'll make sure they know you were kind. As the reporter began taking notes, Mr. Whitaker brought out a small cup of ice cream for Mrs. Carter too. For you, ma'am, he said. Mrs. Carter chuckled. Now that's service I can smile about. The crowd started to thin, and soon it was just the three of them. Amira, Mrs. Carter, and Leah, talking quietly near the window. You know, Leah said, when I was your age, I got kicked out of a store because of my accent. I still remember how that felt. You just taught this whole town something important. Amira tilted her head. What did I teach them? Leah smiled. That even the smallest voice can be the loudest in a quiet room. Mrs. Carter nodded proudly. That's right. You showed grace when most adults wouldn't have. Outside, the sun began to set. The orange light poured through the window, glinting off the glass counter where Amira's cardboard sign now hung proudly. It looked almost magical. People passing by stopped to read it. A few even smiled and took pictures. Word was spreading fast, faster than anyone expected. But in another part of town, at her small apartment, Brenda sat on her couch, staring at her phone as messages started pouring in. Someone had already posted the story on social media. Her name was in the comments, some angry, some disappointed. She turned off the phone, heart pounding. What have I done? She whispered. Meanwhile, back at Creamy Delights, Amira and Mrs. Carter finished their ice cream and walked out together into the cool evening. Mrs. Carter, Amira said softly, do you think she'll ever be nice? Mrs. Carter smiled faintly. Maybe. Sometimes people have to lose something before they learn what really matters. Amira nodded, thinking deeply. Then she looked back at the shop one last time. Through the window, her sign still shone brightly in the light. But what none of them knew yet, what was about to come next, would shake the whole town even more. Because by morning, Amira's story would be on every news channel in the state. The next morning, Maplewood woke up to something it had never experienced before. Phones buzzed. Notifications poured in. Laptops glowed with headlines that spread faster than wildfire. Ice cream shop refuses to serve black child. 10-year-old responds with powerful message. Beneath the headline was a picture of Amira's crayon-colored cardboard sign taped beside the cash register. The words kindness is free written in bold, shaky letters. Within hours, the story went viral. By 9 a.m., hundreds of people were outside Creamy Delights, snapping photos, holding signs, and demanding answers. Some carried posters that read Justice for Amira and No Room for Hate in Maplewood. Cars honked as they passed. News vans lined the street. Inside the ice cream shop, Mr. Whitaker was on the phone, pacing nervously. Yes, ma'am, I've already suspended the employee, he said, rubbing his forehead. No, this is not how our business operates. Yes, we're deeply sorry. He hung up and looked out the window at the growing crowd. His shop had never been this full, and yet it didn't feel like success. Felt like a storm. Meanwhile, across town, Amira was sitting at her kitchen table, legs swinging under her chair. Her mother, Danielle Johnson, stood by the counter with her phone in hand, eyes wide. Amira, she said, turning the screen toward her daughter. Baby, you're all over the internet. Amira blinked. What do you mean? Her mom showed her the news article. There was her picture, smiling shyly, holding her handmade sign. They're saying you changed the whole town, Danielle said softly. Even people from other states are talking about it. Amira looked at the screen, unsure how to feel. Is that good? Danielle smiled, though her eyes were wet. It's good, sweetheart. It's really good. You showed people how to stand tall without being mean. Just then, there was a knock at the door. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. Danielle opened it to find Mrs. Carter standing there, holding a newspaper and wearing her favorite purple scarf. Good morning, Danielle, she said cheerfully. Seems our little star made the front page. Amira's eyes widened. Front page. Mrs. Carter stepped inside and unfolded the newspaper. There, in bold letters across the top, was the headline again, with Amira's smiling face below it. "Would you look at that?" Mrs. Carter said proudly. "First time I've ever seen something this beautiful make the news." Amira blushed. "I didn't think it was that big a deal." Mrs. Carter chuckled. "Sweetheart, kindness always feels small to the one giving it, but it's never small to the one who needs it." Just as she spoke, the phone began ringing nonstop. Danielle picked it up, spoke quickly, then turned to them. "That was Channel 9 News. They want to interview Amira at the park this afternoon." Amira's mouth fell open. "On TV?" Mrs. Carter grinned. "You better brush that hair, baby. You're about to be famous." By noon, the town park was filled with camera crews, curious neighbors, and even the mayor. The same spot where Amira had once played quietly on the swings was now a sea of people holding microphones and cameras. When she arrived, a woman in a red blazer from Channel 9 knelt down with a smile. "Hi, Amira. My name's Rachel. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions?" Amira nodded shyly. The camera light blinked red. Rachel began, "Amira, the whole country has seen your message. Can you tell us, in your own words, what made you write that sign?" Amira looked into the camera. "My teacher said we should make something that shows kindness. I wanted to remind people that you don't need money to be nice. It's free." The crowd clapped softly. Rachel continued, "And when the lady at the shop refused to serve you, why didn't you yell or walk away angry?" Amira thought for a moment. "Because yelling doesn't make people listen, but being kind does." Mrs. Carter's eyes glistened. Danielle held her hand proudly. The reporter smiled. "That's a message everyone needs to hear, Amira. You've inspired a lot of people." Amira grinned shyly. "Thank you, ma'am." But across town, another TV was on, the one in Brenda's living room. She sat alone, hair messy, eyes red from crying. The sound of the news anchor's voice filled the small apartment. The former employee, identified as Brenda Miller, has since been suspended pending investigation. She turned off the TV, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her phone buzzed again. Dozens of missed calls, messages, and angry comments. "You're disgusting. Shame on you. How could you treat a kid like that?" She covered her face. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." A knock came at her door. Hesitant, she opened it to find her neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, standing there with a grocery bag. "You all right, Brenda?" he asked kindly. She shook her head. "No, I messed up bad, Ray. Everyone hates me." He sighed. "You did wrong, no doubt, but maybe you can still make it right." Brenda frowned. "How?" He handed her the newspaper. On the front page was Amira's sign again. "Start with saying sorry, and mean it." Brenda stared at the photo for a long time. Something in her chest twisted. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Creamy Delights stayed busy. People weren't just coming for ice cream anymore. They were coming for Amira. They wanted to see where it happened, to take pictures of the sign, to talk about kindness and change. Mr. Whitaker had even started a fundraiser for Amira's school. Donations poured in. As the crowd grew, a black car pulled up across the street. The door opened slowly, and Brenda stepped out. She looked nervous, holding a small paper bag in her hand. Her steps were hesitant as she crossed the road, every pair of eyes turning toward her. When she entered the shop, the chatter died down instantly. Mr. Whitaker froze behind the counter. "Brenda," he said quietly. She nodded. "I just need a minute." The people in the shop watched as she walked to the counter where the cardboard sign still hung. She stared at it for a long time, her lip trembling. Then, she turned around, facing Amira, who had just walked in with Mrs. Carter and her mom. The room held its breath again. Brenda's voice cracked as she spoke. "Amira, I came to say I'm sorry." Amira blinked. "You are?" Brenda nodded. "Yes, I was wrong. I let my heart be ugly when it should have been kind. You didn't deserve that. And you taught me something I should have already known." Amira tilted her head. "What's that?" Brenda smiled weakly. "That kindness really is free." She placed the paper bag on the counter and slid it toward Amira. "It's your favorite cookies and cream. This time, made by me." Amira looked at Mrs. Carter, who gave her a gentle nod. The little girl stepped forward and took the cone. "Thank you," she said softly. "I forgive you." Tears rolled down Brenda's cheeks. "You do." Amira smiled. "Everyone deserves a second chance." The shop erupted into soft applause. Even Mr. Whitaker smiled. "That's the kind of moment that makes life sweeter than ice cream," he said. Outside, as the cameras captured the scene, the sunset painted the sky gold. Amira, Mrs. Carter, and her mother walked home together, the warm breeze carrying laughter down the quiet street. But as night fell and the lights in Maplewood dimmed, a shadow lingered, because the story wasn't done. Something unexpected was about to happen the next day, something that would test everything they had learned about forgiveness and fairness. And this time, it wouldn't be so easy to fix. The following morning, Maplewood seemed brighter. The tension that had once hung over the small town had started to lift. For the first time in days, people smiled as they passed each other on the streets. Creamy Delights opened early, and families lined up outside, not to protest, but to celebrate. Children of all colors ran around the park across the street, eating their cones and laughing together. Mr. Whitaker had even put up a new sign outside the shop window that read, "All are welcome here." Inside, the famous "Kindness is Free" poster hung proudly by the counter. Beneath it, Amira's photo sat in a small frame, donated by Mrs. Carter. Amira and her mom stopped by that morning just to say hello. The shop was filled with the smell of fresh waffle cones and soft music playing in the background. Brenda, now wearing a light blue apron, stood behind the counter again, nervous but smiling. "Morning, sweetheart," Brenda said gently as Amira walked up. "Hi," Amira replied, her voice cheerful. "You're back." Brenda nodded. "Mr. Whitaker gave me another chance. Said everyone deserves one." Mrs. Carter smiled proudly from a table nearby. "That's how it's supposed to be," she said. "Second chances can fix a lot more than punishment ever could." Brenda laughed softly. "He also said I'm the only one who knows how to make the waffle cones just right." That made everyone laugh. Amira ordered her favorite again, cookies and cream, this time with chocolate drizzle. She handed Brenda the money, even though Brenda tried to wave it away. "I want to pay," Amira said. "It's how things are supposed to be." Brenda nodded with tears in her eyes. "Then it's my honor to serve you, sweetheart." Everything felt peaceful. It was the kind of calm Maplewood hadn't seen in a long time. But peace doesn't always last forever. Just as Amira and her mom were about to leave, a black SUV pulled up outside. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a dark suit, sunglasses, and a serious expression. He wasn't local. Anyone could tell by the way he looked around, observing everything like a detective. The chatter inside died down again. The man stepped in and flashed a small badge. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Special Investigator Grant Walters with the State Civil Rights Office. I'm here regarding the incident that occurred in this establishment 3 days ago." Everyone froze. Mr. Whitaker came forward quickly. "Sir, everything's been resolved peacefully. We've apologized, made amends and—" But the man interrupted. "Sir, with all due respect, when discrimination is reported in a business open to the public, the state is required to investigate. This is not about blame. It's about ensuring fairness and justice." Brenda's face turned pale again. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped the counter. I already said sorry," she whispered. Amira looked at her, confused. "What's going on?" Mrs. Carter's warm expression faded. She could sense something wasn't right. Mr. Walters looked around the shop, his tone calm but firm. "We've reviewed several video clips recorded by bystanders. What happened here was a clear violation of anti-discrimination laws." A murmur spread through the crowd. Amira's mom stepped forward. "But she apologized," Danielle said softly. "My daughter forgave her." Mr. Walters nodded respectfully. "I understand, ma'am, and I admire your daughter's compassion. But forgiveness doesn't erase accountability. The law still has to do its part." Brenda's eyes filled with tears. "Please, sir, I've learned my lesson. I've changed. He looked at her sympathetically. I believe you have, ma'am. But this isn't just about you. It's about setting a standard for the entire community. The words hung heavy in the air. Amira's small voice broke the silence. Are you going to take her away? Mr. Walters knelt down to meet her eyes. No, sweetheart. I'm not here to take anyone away. I just need to make sure things like this don't happen again, to anyone. Amira looked at Brenda and then at the investigator. But she's nice now. She even gave me ice cream. Mrs. Carter stood and gently rested a hand on Amira's shoulder. Baby, sometimes life gives us lessons the hard way, but kindness and consequences can exist at the same time. Mr. Walters nodded. That's true, ma'am. He took out a small notepad and began asking questions. To Mr. Whitaker, to Brenda, to a few witnesses who had been there that day. Cameras from the news crew that had gathered outside started flashing again. People began whispering, and soon, the peaceful energy turned heavy once more. When Mr. Walters finished, he turned to Brenda. I'll need to take your statement officially tomorrow. You're not under arrest, but you will be required to attend a hearing downtown next week. Brenda nodded silently, tears slipping down her cheeks. I understand. As the investigator turned to leave, Amira suddenly ran up to him. Wait! He stopped. She reached into her backpack again, the same pink one she had carried that first day. Everyone watched, remembering what happened last time she reached into it. This time, she pulled out something different. A small glass jar with colorful folded notes inside. She handed it to Mr. Walters. These are my kindness notes. My teacher says when people are sad or angry, they should read one. It helps. Mr. Walters took the jar, visibly moved. Thank you, Amira. I'll make sure to read them. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. You're a remarkable young lady. When he left, the shop fell quiet again. Brenda sank onto a stool, her hands covering her face. I just wanted to make things right, she whispered. Mrs. Carter walked over and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You still can, she said softly. But sometimes, making things right means walking through the hard parts too. Brenda nodded weakly. I guess I deserve it. Amira walked up beside her and took her hand. You're not bad, she said quietly. You just forgot to be good for a little while. Those words hit deeper than anything. Brenda squeezed her small hand, sobbing quietly. As the day went on, people kept coming into Creamy Delights. Some came to support Amira. Others came to support Brenda. And for the first time, those two groups weren't against each other, they were together. They laughed, talked, and shared ice cream, as if the shop itself had become a place of healing. By evening, Mrs. Carter sat outside on her favorite bench, watching the sunset glow over the street. Amira sat beside her, finishing the last bite of her cone. Mrs. Carter, she said softly, do you think the man will forgive Brenda? Mrs. Carter smiled gently. Maybe not at first, but forgiveness spreads, baby. It's like sunlight. It touches everything eventually. Amira leaned against her shoulder. I hope so. The old woman patted her hand. You've already started it. The rest will follow. As they sat in silence, a light wind carried laughter from the shop and the faint music of the radio playing inside. The town was changing, slowly, painfully, but truly. Yet, just as the peace began to settle again, Mrs. Carter's phone buzzed. She looked at it, her brow furrowing. What's wrong? Amira asked. Mrs. Carter's face grew serious. It's the news. She turned the screen so Amira could see. A breaking headline flashed across it. Investigator Grant Walters receives threats after Maplewood ice cream incident. Amira's eyes widened. Someone's mad at him? Mrs. Carter's voice was quiet. Looks like not everyone wants to see kindness win. The wind grew colder. The story that had started with a little girl's innocence was far from over. And now, the fight for kindness had just gotten much darker. The morning after the threats were reported, Maplewood felt different. The usual hum of birds and children playing outside seemed quieter, almost cautious. Even the breeze that once danced through the trees felt heavier, as if warning the town that trouble was near. Amira woke up to the sound of her mother's phone buzzing. Danielle Johnson sat at the kitchen table, reading the latest news alerts on her tablet. Her face was tight, her brow furrowed. "Amira," Danielle called softly. "Come here for a second." The little girl padded over, still in her pajamas, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. "What's wrong, Mom?" Danielle handed her the tablet. Across the screen, the headline blazed in bold letters. Maplewood civil rights investigator threatened after ice cream shop incident. Amira frowned. But he was trying to help. Her mother nodded, biting her lip. "I know, baby, but some people get angry when they see change happening too fast. They don't like being reminded that they were wrong." Amira's small hands curled around her bear. "Does that mean someone's going to hurt him?" Danielle shook her head, trying to calm her. "They might try, but he's strong, and there are people making sure he's safe." Mrs. Carter arrived shortly after, her silver hair shining in the morning sun. She entered with her usual calm, though there was a subtle tension in her steps. She carried a small envelope, holding it tightly in one hand. "Good morning, Danielle." "Amira," she said softly. "I came by because I wanted to talk about what's happening." Amira looked up, worried. "Is he okay?" Mrs. Carter's warm eyes met hers. "He's fine for now, but threats like these remind us that even when you do something good, there will always be people who try to stop it. That doesn't mean you stop being kind." Amira thought about that for a moment. "So, I should still be nice even if someone is mean to me?" Mrs. Carter smiled. "Exactly. Kindness isn't about how others act. It's about what's in your heart." By mid-morning, the streets around Creamy Delights were buzzing again, but not in the same cheerful way as before. Police cars lined the block, their lights flashing quietly. Officers spoke to business owners, checking cameras and talking to residents. Inside the shop, Mr. Whitaker was tense. He wiped down the counters repeatedly, though the place was already spotless. Brenda worked quietly behind the counter, keeping her eyes low, her hands trembling slightly. The air smelled sweet from the waffle cones, but there was a heaviness that no ice cream could lighten. Then, the bell above the door jingled sharply. Amira, who had come in with her mother and Mrs. Carter, froze. A man in a plain suit stepped inside. He had short black hair, dark sunglasses, and a serious expression. Even without a badge, everyone could feel his authority. "Special Agent Leon Price," he announced, showing a small silver badge. "I'm here to ensure everyone's safety regarding the threats against Investigator Walters." Mr. Whitaker stepped forward immediately. "Agent Price, thank goodness. Please, you have to tell me. How dangerous is it?" Price's voice was steady, almost cold. "At this point, the threats are serious enough that we're increasing security around him. We're also checking the backgrounds of anyone connected to the case to make sure nothing escalates." Amira's eyes were wide. "So, he's safe?" Price nodded. "For now. But people can be unpredictable. That's why we're taking this seriously." Brenda's hands gripped the counter tightly. She looked at Amira, guilt written across her face. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. Mrs. Carter placed a hand gently on Brenda's shoulder. "Sweetheart, this isn't about your mistakes anymore. It's about making sure good people stay protected while the town learns a lesson." Amira frowned. "But why would anyone threaten him just because he helped me?" Mrs. Carter's eyes softened. "Because some people hate being reminded of their wrongs. They fear change, even when it's for the better." The conversation was interrupted by a loud commotion outside. People were shouting. A small crowd had gathered near the front of the shop, holding signs and taking photos. Some were supporters of Amira, while others were angry, clearly upset about the news of the threats. Mr. Whitaker quickly went to the door to calm them. "Please, everyone, remain peaceful. This shop is about kindness. Let's show that today." Amira stayed close to her mother, gripping Mrs. Carter's hand. "This is scary," she whispered. Mrs. Carter nodded. "Sometimes doing the right thing can feel scary, baby. But courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about facing it anyway." The afternoon passed slowly. Investigators and officers moved through the crowd, speaking with journalists, checking cameras, and taking statements. Amira tried to focus on her ice cream cone, but the tension made it hard to enjoy. Just as she was about to take a bite, the front door burst open with a loud bang. The bell jingled violently, and the crowd in the shop gasped. A man in a dark hoodie ran inside, moving quickly toward the counter. People screamed. Mr. Whitaker shouted for him to stop. Amira froze, clutching her mom's hand. Mrs. Carter stepped in front of her protectively. The man slammed something down on the counter. Something small, metallic, and heavy. Everyone leaned back, fear in their eyes. "Leave," he shouted. "Tell everyone in town. Justice isn't for them." Before anyone could react, he turned and bolted out of the door, disappearing into the street chaos. Police officers rushed in, sirens blaring, but he was gone. The object on the counter glimmered under the fluorescent lights. It was a small, locked briefcase. Everyone stared at it, unsure what it contained. Mr. Whitaker approached cautiously. What is this?" Agent Price stepped forward. "We don't know yet. Could be dangerous. Nobody touch it." Brenda's hands shook. "I didn't do this. I swear I didn't." Mrs. Carter knelt down beside Amira, her expression serious. "Baby, this is the kind of situation where we need to be very careful. Sometimes, doing the right thing means letting the professionals handle the scary stuff." Amira nodded, though her stomach felt tight. "Will he be okay?" Price's eyes softened slightly. "Investigator Walters will be fine. But right now, we need to focus on safety. This briefcase will be checked, and the person who left it will be found." The tension in the shop was almost unbearable. The once cheerful atmosphere, filled with laughter and the smell of waffle cones, had shifted to quiet fear. Even the customers who had come to support Amira sat silently, unsure of what to do. Finally, Price spoke again. "Everyone, please remain calm and stay in the shop until the bomb squad arrives. This is for your own safety." Amira sat close to her mother and Mrs. Carter, holding both of their hands tightly. Her ice cream had melted completely, but she didn't care. She couldn't take her eyes off the locked briefcase. "I just wanted everything to be happy again," she whispered. Mrs. Carter squeezed her hand. "Sometimes happiness comes slowly, baby. And sometimes, even when people try to ruin it, we have to be brave enough to face the storm." The bell above the door jingled again, and the crowd outside murmured nervously. The once celebratory neighbors now watched anxiously, unsure what the outcome would be. Inside, Amira sat quietly, thinking about her sign, her ice cream, and the lessons she had learned. She realized that even small acts of kindness could ripple into something much bigger, sometimes bigger than she could imagine. And now the storm had arrived. The briefcase on the counter seemed to hum with quiet menace, waiting for the professionals to open it. Maplewood had been tested before, but nothing like this. And everyone, Amira, her mom, Mrs. Carter, Brenda, Mr. Whitaker, and even the officers, knew that the next few hours would determine whether kindness could survive fear. The quiet tension inside Creamy Delights was almost unbearable. Every clock ticked like a drum, counting down the moments until the bomb squad could arrive. Officers stood near the doors, their radios crackling with updates. Even the smell of freshly baked waffle cones seemed to fade under the weight of fear. Amira sat on the bench near the counter, clutching Mrs. Carter's hand tightly. Her ice cream had melted entirely, leaving only a sticky mess on the paper cone wrapper. She didn't care. All her attention was on the small black briefcase that had been left on the counter, a silent threat that could change everything. Mrs. Carter whispered softly, "Baby, breathe. We can't let fear take over. Courage isn't just about facing mean people. It's about facing danger too, even when your heart is pounding." Amira nodded, her small eyes wide but determined. "I'm not scared," she said, though her voice trembled. Brenda, standing behind the counter, wiped her hands nervously on her apron. "I didn't do this," she whispered. "I don't even know who would. I just wanted to fix things." Mr. Whitaker came over, adjusting his tie. We'll find out who's behind this. But right now, the most important thing is keeping everyone safe. Outside, a group of neighbors and supporters gathered, their faces filled with concern. Some held signs from the previous days, now weathered and slightly torn. Others simply stood silently, unsure what to do. The crowd had grown larger since the morning, as word had spread through social media. The sound of sirens grew louder, and soon a convoy of emergency vehicles arrived at the street outside the shop. Officers guided everyone inside to stay put. From the back of the building, 2 uniformed bomb squad technicians entered, carrying specialized equipment and a heavy toolbox. "Stay back, everyone," one of them instructed. His voice was calm but authoritative. "We're going to handle this carefully. No one needs to panic." Amira's mother knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, you're safe. The professionals know what to do." The technicians set up a small perimeter around the briefcase, carefully examining it from all angles. They wore thick protective gear, helmets with visors, and heavy gloves. The room felt smaller, every sound amplified. The clink of their tools, the footsteps of officers, even the creak of the shop floor. Amira watched in silence. She remembered her sign, her message about kindness, and the lessons Mrs. Carter had taught her. She realized that courage wasn't just about saying the right words. Sometimes it meant staying calm when danger was near. One technician carefully placed a robotic arm near the briefcase. The device had a small camera and gripping tool which moved slowly toward the case. Everyone in the shop held their breath. The robot nudged the briefcase slightly. It didn't move, but the technicians signaled each other with subtle hand gestures. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. "What if it's real?" Amira whispered to Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Carter placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then we let the people trained for this handle it. You've already done your part by being kind. Now it's their turn to do theirs." The robot nudged again, this time slightly lifting the latch of the briefcase. The room was so quiet you could hear someone's heartbeat, or maybe it was just Amira's. Then, with a soft click, the briefcase opened. A collective gasp echoed through the shop. Inside, instead of explosives, there were dozens of handwritten notes, a few small trinkets, and a thick envelope. The technician carefully removed the envelope and handed it to Agent Price, who had been standing nearby, observing silently. He opened it carefully and began reading. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his jaw tightened. The room stayed silent as the officers waited for instructions. Amira stepped forward slightly, curiosity and fear battling in her chest. What is it?" she whispered. Agent Price looked up. "It's a threat, but it's also a message. The person who left this wants to scare Investigator Walters and anyone who supports justice in this town." Brenda's face went pale. They're still angry about what happened with me?" Price nodded. "It appears that way. Whoever left this is trying to intimidate anyone involved. But thankfully, there's no actual explosives. It's psychological intimidation." Mrs. Carter exhaled slowly. "Scare tactics. They've been around longer than any of us. What matters is how we respond." Amira's eyes narrowed. "We can't let them win." "No," Mrs. Carter said firmly. "We can't. You've already shown them that kindness is stronger than cruelty, Amira. Now we have to show them courage is stronger than fear." The officers began cataloging the notes. Most were threats written in angry, sloppy handwriting. Some referenced the ice cream shop, some directly targeted Investigator Walters, and a few were simply crude warnings. Agent Price looked at Mr. Whitaker. "We'll need statements from everyone present today, including Brenda. This is evidence in the ongoing investigation." Brenda nodded silently, swallowing hard. "I understand." The technicians carefully removed the rest of the briefcase contents, placing everything into evidence bags. "This will be analyzed in detail," one of them explained. "We'll check fingerprints, handwriting, and anything else that might help us find the person responsible." As the adrenaline slowly began to fade, the shop felt calmer again. Customers began trickling in cautiously, curious about the commotion, but reassured by the visible police presence. Amira stayed close to Mrs. Carter and her mother. "Do you think they'll find the person?" she asked quietly. Mrs. Carter smiled faintly. "I believe they will. But even if they don't, Amira, the important thing is what you've taught this town. Fear can't erase the lessons of kindness and bravery you've shared." Her words made Amira feel small but powerful at the same time. She realized that even though the threat was real, she had already faced much worse. People refusing to serve her ice cream, being humiliated in front of everyone, and feeling powerless. And now, she was learning that courage could grow even in the face of fear. Just as the shop began to return to a semblance of normalcy, a police officer came over to Mr. Whitaker. "Sir, you may want to see this." He held up a small tablet. On the screen was a video sent anonymously to the police department. It showed someone pacing outside the ice cream shop the night before, holding a camera, clearly surveilling the building. The person's face was partially hidden, but the footage captured enough to make the officers pause. Agent Price frowned. This confirms they were planning more than just a scare. They were watching the shop, waiting for the right moment. Brenda's hands shook again. I didn't think they'd go this far." "No one could," Mrs. Carter said, her voice firm. "But that's exactly why courage matters. We can't back down just because someone wants to frighten us." Amira looked around at everyone. The police, her mother, Mrs. Carter, even Brenda, and for the first time, she felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She realized that being brave didn't mean being fearless. It meant standing tall even when your knees shake and your heart pounds. Agent Price turned to the group. "We're increasing patrols around the shop and the neighborhood. Investigator Walters will also have protection. For now, stay vigilant and stay safe. And remember, threats only have power if you let them." The words echoed in the room, a quiet reassurance against the heavy tension. As the day wore on, the ice cream shop slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Customers smiled and laughed, though some still glanced nervously at the doors. Mr. Whitaker handed out cones with a careful smile, and Brenda, though visibly shaken, served each customer with care. Amira finally finished her new cone and looked at the shop around her. She realized something important. Kindness had not only brought people together, it had created courage in ways she hadn't expected. And now, she understood that the fight for kindness and justice wasn't over. Because as the sun began to set over Maplewood that evening, a shadow lingered outside the shop. A figure watched silently from a distance, hidden in the twilight, planning their next move. The storm was far from over. The morning after the surveillance footage surfaced, Maplewood felt tense. The streets were quieter than usual, and people whispered behind their doors and in coffee shops. Parents held their children close, and neighbors peeked cautiously out windows. Everyone had seen the news. The threats were real, and someone had been watching Creamy Delights, watching Amira and everyone involved in the ice cream shop incident. Amira woke up early, her small body still buzzing with the events from the previous day. She sat on her bed, staring at her crayon-colored cardboard sign pinned to the wall. "Kindness is free." She touched the letters gently, as if drawing courage from them. Her mother, Danielle, entered the room with a cup of tea in hand. "Morning, baby," she said softly. "Are you nervous about going to the shop today?" Amira shook her head. "A little, but I want to help." Danielle sat beside her. "Helping doesn't always mean being in danger, Amira. We just have to be smart. Remember what Mrs. Carter said, courage isn't being fearless. It's being brave even when you're scared." Amira nodded, trying to remember those words. By 9 a.m., the streets around the ice cream shop were already busy. Police patrols had doubled, officers stationed at every corner. Yellow tape blocked off certain areas to prevent outsiders from getting too close. Inside Creamy Delights, the atmosphere was tense but calm. Mr. Whitaker moved behind the counter, wiping it repeatedly, though it was already spotless. Brenda, though still nervous, smiled at the regulars who cautiously returned to the shop. Amira arrived with Danielle and Mrs. Carter. She clutched her pink backpack tightly, the straps digging into her small shoulders. "Morning, sweetheart," Mrs. Carter said, kneeling to meet her eyes. Today we keep calm, we stay kind, and we watch each other's backs. Understood? Yes, Amira whispered. As they stepped inside, Agent Price arrived again, this time without sunglasses, letting the team's presence be visible but not intimidating. Good morning, everyone, he said. We'll maintain extra security today. Nothing will happen while I'm here. Amira felt a little safer knowing he was close. The day began quietly at first. Customers trickled in, some still wary, others excited to be part of a story that had gone viral. Kids ran around the park outside, their laughter blending with the soft music inside the shop. But just as the first orders were being taken, the bell above the door jingled sharply. Everyone looked up. A man in a dark hoodie stepped inside, his face partially obscured by the hood. He didn't shout or run. He moved calmly, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Agent Price immediately tensed. Freeze, he said. Hands where I can see them. The man paused, raising his hands slightly. I'm not here to hurt anyone, he said. His voice was quiet but steady. I just want to speak. Mr. Whitaker stepped forward cautiously. Who are you? My name is Carter Lane, the man said, pulling back the hood to reveal a pale, anxious face. I know about the threats. I know who's been sending them. The room went silent. Even Amira stopped mid-step, ice cream cone in hand. You do? Agent Price asked sharply. Carter nodded. Yes, I was part of the group, but I don't want to be anymore. I didn't think it would go this far. It was supposed to be a prank, a scare, but it got out of control. Brenda's eyes widened. You're the one? Yes, Carter admitted. I didn't realize it could put people in real danger. Mrs. Carter placed a hand gently on Amira's shoulder. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, she said softly. Agent Price motioned for Carter to sit. We'll need a full statement and you'll have to come with us, but right now you're safe. And we'll make sure no one here is hurt. Carter nodded, relief flooding his face. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. I was scared of what the others would do if I backed out. Amira stepped closer, clutching her backpack. Why did you try to scare us? She asked, her voice small but firm. Carter looked down at his shoes. I thought it would be funny at first. I didn't think you'd be brave or that people would notice how wrong it was. Amira's brow furrowed. So you learned that being mean isn't funny? Carter swallowed hard. Yes, I did. Mrs. Carter smiled faintly. Then you've learned an important lesson, Carter. And the best thing now is to use that lesson to make things right. The atmosphere in the shop softened slightly. Even Brenda seemed to relax. It's true, she said quietly. Sometimes people don't realize how much their actions can hurt. Carter nodded. I know, and I want to help fix it. I'll tell the authorities everything I know about the others. Agent Price scribbled notes in his pad. Good. That cooperation will make a big difference. It will also show that even those who make mistakes can choose the right path. Amira, still clutching her backpack, looked around the shop. She saw her cardboard sign hanging proudly. The words kindness is free staring back at her. And she realized something. Even the people who had tried to scare them had the chance to change. Can people really change? She asked quietly. Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. Yes, baby. Everyone can. It doesn't happen overnight, and it isn't always easy. But it can happen if they want it to. Carter looked at Amira and said softly, I want to change. I want to be better. Amira nodded, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. She realized that courage and kindness could inspire even the most unlikely people. The day continued with a cautious calm. Customers returned to the shop, the officer stayed visible, and the shop began to feel like a safe place once more. Ice cream was served, conversations flowed, and children's laughter filled the air. But just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the shop floor, Agent Price's radio crackled urgently. All units, we've got a situation. There's movement near the park across the street. Unknown individual carrying a suspicious package. Approach with caution. Everyone froze. Amira's small voice trembled. Not again. Mrs. Carter held her hand tightly. Stay calm, baby. We've faced hard things before. We'll handle this. Mr. Whitaker looked out the window, his face pale. It's happening again? Agent Price grabbed his radio. Everyone stay inside. Lock the doors. This could escalate quickly. Carter, the man who had confessed, stepped forward. I know who it is. It's the others. They didn't want me to leave the group. They're trying to finish what we started. Brenda's hands shook. Oh no! Outside, the faint silhouette of a figure appeared near the playground, carrying a small box. The officers moved quickly, surrounding the area. Inside the shop, the tension was suffocating. Every heartbeat seemed to echo loudly in the small space. Amira held tightly to Mrs. Carter and her mother, trying to steady herself. Then, a loud explosion shook the street, not from the box, but from a car backfiring nearby. The crowd outside screamed and scattered. The shop doors rattled. Everyone ducked instinctively. Amira whispered, "This can't be happening again." Mrs. Carter looked at her with a firm gaze. "It's happening, baby, but we're going to get through it. Courage isn't just for happy times. It's for times like these too." The officers moved toward the figure near the park cautiously. Agent Price's voice cut through the chaos. "Step away from the package. Now!" The figure hesitated, then bolted, leaving the box behind. The officers moved in swiftly, securing the area. Inside the shop, Amira exhaled shakily. Her hands were clammy, but her eyes were determined. She realized something important. Fear would always exist, but it didn't have to control her. Outside, the officers lifted the box carefully, examining it. No immediate danger was detected, but the message was clear. Someone in Maplewood was still willing to try to intimidate and frighten them. Inside Creamy Delights, the people slowly returned to their seats, the tension lingering but lessening slightly. Amira looked at her cardboard sign again. She realized that courage, kindness, and forgiveness were stronger than threats, explosions, or fear. And she knew, deep down, that no matter what happened next, she would keep standing tall. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting the streets in a dim glow. Maplewood had survived another test, but the shadow of what was to come loomed over the town, because someone was still out there, watching, waiting. The following morning, Maplewood felt like a town on edge. The sun rose over the quiet streets, but the usual sounds of laughter, birds, and children playing were muted. Parents held their children closer, and neighbors peeked out of windows, whispering about the events of the previous night. Even the bakery across the street from Creamy Delights seemed to bake more slowly, as though afraid to disturb the uneasy peace. Amira woke up early, hugging her pink backpack to her chest. She had barely slept, thinking about the figure in the park, the suspicious package, and the way her heart had thumped in her chest the night before. Her mother, Danielle, entered the room carrying a small plate of toast. "Good morning, baby," she said softly. "I know you're worried, but today we'll stick together and stay safe." Amira nodded slowly. I don't want anyone to get hurt. Not Brenda, not Mr. Whitaker, not even the man who left the briefcase." Danielle smiled gently. "That's why you're special, Amira. You care even when it's scary. But we need to let the adults handle the dangerous parts. Your job is to be brave, kind, and smart." Amira hugged her stuffed bear tightly. "I can do that." By mid-morning, the streets around Creamy Delights were busier than usual, though the tension was palpable. Police patrols were everywhere, and yellow caution tape cordoned off sections of the street. The officers had increased their presence around the park across from the shop, where the suspicious package had been left the night before. Inside the shop, Mr. Whitaker moved behind the counter nervously, wiping it again and again despite its cleanliness. Brenda stood behind him, her hands trembling slightly as she served ice cream to cautious customers. Even with Agent Price present, the atmosphere was thick with unease. Amira entered with Danielle and Mrs. Carter, her eyes scanning the room. "It feels heavy today," she whispered. Mrs. Carter placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. That's because it is, baby. But heavy doesn't mean hopeless. Courage shines brightest when times are hard. The morning passed with a cautious calm. Customers came and went, careful not to draw attention, and the children playing outside were watched closely by officers stationed at every corner. Then, just as the clock struck noon, the bell above the shop doors jingled sharply. Everyone looked up. A man stepped inside, this time wearing a neatly pressed suit, sunglasses, and a serious expression. He didn't shout or run. He simply looked around, taking in the tense atmosphere. "I'm Special Agent Leon Price," he announced, flashing his badge briefly. "I'm here to update you on the ongoing investigation. We've increased patrols, and additional officers will remain on duty throughout the day. No one here is in immediate danger, but caution is necessary." Amira nodded, clutching her backpack tightly. "Thank you for protecting us," she whispered. Agent Price gave a slight smile. "That's my job, young lady, and you've helped too. By standing tall and showing courage, you've made a difference in this town." Just as the tension seemed to ease slightly, a loud crash came from the park across the street. Everyone froze and even the officers tensed. "What was that?" Mr. Whitaker asked, his face pale. Price immediately grabbed his radio. "All units, report in. Possible disturbance at the park." Inside the shop, Amira's hands trembled. Mrs. Carter held her close. "Stay calm, baby. The professionals are handling it." The officers moved quickly outside, but the crowd inside the shop grew anxious. Customers whispered nervously, some leaving the shop entirely. A few minutes later, one of the officers returned, holding a small, crumpled piece of paper. "It appears someone left another note in the park. No immediate danger detected, but it's another warning." Brenda's hands shook. "Why won't they stop?" she whispered. "I've apologized. I've changed." Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. "Sometimes people refuse to see the truth, Brenda. But their refusal doesn't change who you are or the lessons you've learned." Amira looked up at Brenda. "You were brave yesterday. You apologized and tried to make things right. That counts for a lot." Brenda nodded, a small tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you, Amira. That means more than you know." Meanwhile, Agent Price examined the note carefully. It was written in angry, hurried handwriting, similar to the previous threats, but this time it included a sketch of the shop and instructions to avoid certain areas. Clearly, the person was becoming more organized and dangerous. "This is escalating," Price said quietly to Mr. Whitaker and Brenda. "We need to be extra vigilant. I recommend limiting the shop's exposure until we identify the individual responsible for these threats." Mr. Whitaker nodded slowly. "I understand, but closing the shop, it feels like letting fear win." Price looked at him seriously. "It's a temporary measure for safety, not defeat. You've already inspired people in this town. That inspiration doesn't vanish if we take precautions." As the day wore on, more neighbors gathered outside the shop, some offering support, others watching nervously. Amira noticed how everyone seemed to hold their breath, as if waiting for the next event to unfold. Then, just before evening, a delivery truck pulled up outside the shop. It wasn't part of the official investigation, and no one expected it. The driver handed a small package to Mr. Whitaker. Inside, there was a stack of envelopes addressed to Amira, each labeled Kindness Challenge. The letters encouraged her to perform small acts of kindness for people in town, helping neighbors, sharing ice cream with strangers, leaving notes of encouragement. Amira's eyes widened. "These are for me?" she asked, turning the envelopes over in her hands. Mrs. Carter smiled warmly. "Someone is trying to remind you, and everyone else, that goodness and bravery create ripples. Even in the face of fear, your actions inspire others." Danielle nodded. "This is proof that what you've done matters. Even the smallest gestures of kindness can change hearts." Brenda looked at the letters and then at Amira. You've taught all of us something important. Even me." Amira smiled faintly, feeling a small spark of hope. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the streets in deep orange and purple, a shadow appeared in the distance. A figure lingered near the edge of the park, watching the shop intently. It moved with purpose, its presence silent but unmistakable. Agent Price noticed it immediately. "Stay inside. Do not approach the windows. We're going to handle this," he instructed firmly, reaching for his radio. The officers moved quickly to surround the figure, but it disappeared into the fading light before they could reach it. Inside the shop, everyone exhaled shakily. The tension lingered like a heavy fog. Amira held tightly to her backpack. "They're still out there," she whispered, fear and determination mingling in her voice. Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. "Yes, baby, and that's why courage matters. Even when danger isn't gone, we keep standing. We keep doing what's right. That's what makes people stronger than fear." The town had survived another test, but the shadow of uncertainty still loomed. Maplewood was learning that bravery and kindness were never simple. They required persistence, even in the darkest moments. As the evening deepened, Amira looked at her kindness is free sign once more. The letters seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight, a reminder that no matter what happened outside, the lessons she had learned and shared could not be taken away. But somewhere in the distance, beyond the glow of the streetlights, the figure waited, patient and watching, plotting the next move. Maplewood's story was far from over, and the battle between courage and fear was only beginning. The next morning, Maplewood awoke under a gray sky, the air heavy with unease. The events of the past days had left everyone on edge. Even the usual morning chatter in the coffee shops and sidewalks seemed quieter, subdued by the lingering fear of the unknown figure that had been stalking the town. Amira woke with a start, her heart still pounding from dreams of shadows and threats. She clutched her pink backpack tightly, her small hands pressing against the straps, as if holding on to courage itself. Her mother, Danielle, entered the room with a reassuring smile, though her eyes betrayed her own worry. "Good morning, baby," she said softly. "I know you're tired, but today we need to stick together." Amira nodded slowly. "Mom, will everything be okay at the shop today?" Danielle knelt beside her. "I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I do know this: you're brave, you're kind, and you're smart. That will help keep us all safe." By mid-morning, Creamy Delights was buzzing again, though the energy was tense. Police vehicles lined the streets, and officers patrolled the sidewalks, scanning for anything suspicious. Agent Price was back inside the shop, his presence reassuring but firm. Brenda moved cautiously behind the counter, her hands still trembling from the recent threats, but her eyes were determined. She had learned a hard lesson about the consequences of her actions, and now she was committed to making things right. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. Amira, Danielle, and Mrs. Carter entered the shop. Amira clutched her backpack and looked around at the familiar faces of Mr. Whitaker, Brenda, and the officers. The familiar smell of waffle cones and ice cream made her feel slightly safer, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. "Remember, baby, courage isn't the absence of fear. The standing tall even when your heart is pounding. Today we'll face whatever comes together." Amira nodded, taking a deep breath. For a while, the day seemed calm. Customers trickled in, cautiously at first, then with more confidence as they saw the visible presence of law enforcement. The children outside played under the watchful eyes of officers, and the soft music inside the shop helped ease the tension. But as the clock neared noon, a loud crash echoed from the alley behind the shop. Everyone froze. "What now?" Brenda whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Agent Price immediately reached for his radio. "All units, report. Possible disturbance behind the shop." The officers moved quickly to secure the area, and Mr. Whitaker ushered everyone inside to the safety of the counter area. Amira clutched Mrs. Carter's hand tightly, her heart pounding. From the alley, a figure emerged, carrying a small, suspicious-looking package. The person's face was partially hidden, but the posture was unmistakably deliberate and tense. Agent Price shouted, "Stop! Put the package down and step away. The figure hesitated for a moment, then bolted down the alley, dropping the package in a small thud. Officers immediately secured the area and moved to examine it carefully. Inside the shop, Amira's small voice trembled. "Why won't they just leave us alone?" Mrs. Carter held her close. "Sometimes, baby, people don't understand kindness or courage. They try to intimidate others because they are scared of the change they see. But courage and kindness are stronger than fear." The officers opened the package carefully. Inside, there were more notes, threats, this time accompanied by crudely drawn symbols, and a small device that looked like it might be harmless but could have been dangerous. The bomb squad had to examine it carefully before confirming it was a bluff, intended only to scare. Agent Price turned to Mr. Whitaker and Brenda. "This is serious. They're escalating their intimidation. We need to ensure everyone here remains safe, and we need to identify the person responsible before they attempt anything worse." Brenda's hands trembled. I don't know what else to do. I apologized. I'm trying to change." Mrs. Carter placed a comforting hand on Brenda's shoulder. "Actions speak louder than mistakes. You're already doing what's right now. That counts for a lot." Amira looked around at everyone. The police, her mother, Mrs. Carter, Brenda, and Mr. Whitaker, and felt a surge of determination. She understood that fear could never control her if she remained brave and kind. Just as the officers finished securing the package, another loud commotion erupted outside. This time, it wasn't in the alley but across the street. A dark van had pulled up, and someone was moving quickly toward the playground, carrying what looked like another suspicious package. "Everyone stay inside," Agent Price ordered, his voice sharp. "Do not go near the windows." Amira felt her stomach tighten. She wanted to cry, but she remembered Mrs. Carter's words. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite fear. Brenda stepped closer to Amira. "It's going to be okay, baby. We're safe here." The officers moved quickly outside to intercept the person, but the figure disappeared into the crowd before they could reach them. The van sped away down the street, leaving a wake of tension behind it. Inside the shop, everyone exhaled shakily. The tension remained, heavy and suffocating. Amira's small hands were clammy, but she held her backpack tightly, as if holding onto her courage. Agent Price addressed the group. "This is serious. The individual responsible is escalating their threats. We must remain vigilant, but I want everyone to understand. Your courage and kindness have already made a difference. Threats can't undo what you've built here." Amira looked down at her kindness's free sign, the letters seeming to glow even in the dim light of the shop. She realized that even though the threats were real and frightening, the courage and kindness she had shared could not be taken away. Then, a soft jingle of the shop's doorbell interrupted the tense silence. Everyone looked up cautiously. A young boy, about 8 years old, stepped inside, holding a small envelope. He looked nervous but determined. I think this is for you, Amira," he said softly, handing her the envelope. Amira opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of small notes, each encouraging her to continue spreading kindness and bravery. Some were drawings, some were messages, and some were simple words. "Keep going. You are strong. Kindness wins." Tears filled her eyes. They want me to keep being brave?" Mrs. Carter nodded, smiling gently. "Yes, baby. This is proof that your actions inspire others, even when things are scary." Amira felt a surge of hope. She realized that even though fear was real, it could not overpower the courage and kindness she had already shared with her town. But as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets of Maplewood, a figure lingered in the darkness outside the shop, watching, waiting. The town had survived another day, but the shadow of danger was still there, looming and patient. Maplewood's battle between fear and courage was far from over, and Amira knew that the coming days would test the strength of her bravery and the power of her kindness like never before. Maplewood woke to a sky streaked with gray clouds, as though the weather itself sensed the tension in the town. The streets were quieter than usual. Children whispered as they walked to school, and adults cast nervous glances at each other, afraid to speak too loudly. The events of the past days, the threats, the briefcases, the suspicious packages, had left the town on edge. Amira awoke early, hugging her pink backpack like a shield. Her dreams had been restless, full of shadows and voices warning her to be afraid. But she remembered Mrs. Carter's words. Courage is standing tall even when you are scared. Her mother, Danielle, entered her room with a plate of toast. "Morning, baby," she said softly, though her voice carried a tension she tried to hide. "We have to stick together today. Everything will be okay if we stay careful." Amira nodded. "I'm not scared. I can be brave." Danielle smiled, brushing Amira's hair back gently. "That's my girl. Remember, bravery isn't about never being afraid. It's about what you do when you are." By mid-morning, Creamy Delights had already become the center of the town's attention again. Police patrols lined the streets, their presence visible and reassuring. Officers stood near the shop, their eyes scanning every corner, ready for anything. Agent Price was there as well, his serious expression betraying the constant vigilance required to keep everyone safe. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but calm. Mr. Whitaker moved carefully behind the counter, wiping it repeatedly though it was already clean. Brenda stood beside him, her hands trembling slightly but her eyes determined. She had learned hard lessons about the consequences of fear and intimidation, and now she was committed to being brave. Amira entered with her mother and Mrs. Carter. She clutched her backpack tightly, her small hands shaking a little as she scanned the room. "It feels heavy today," she whispered. Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. "Yes, baby, it does. But even when it feels heavy, we keep moving forward. Courage shines brightest when things are hardest." The morning passed with a cautious calm. Customers trickled in carefully, their eyes darting to the windows and doors as they moved. The children outside played under the watchful eyes of officers stationed throughout the block. Then, just before noon, a loud crash echoed from the alley behind the shop. Everyone froze. "What now?" Brenda whispered, her voice trembling. Agent Price immediately grabbed his radio. "All units, report. Possible disturbance in the alley." Officers moved swiftly outside to secure the area. Inside, Mr. Whitaker ushered everyone toward the safety of the counter, and Amira clutched Mrs. Carter's hand tightly. Her heart pounded, and for a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm her. From the alley, a figure appeared carrying a small, suspicious package. The person's face was partially hidden, but their posture was deliberate, tense, and unnerving. Agent Price shouted, "Stop! Put the package down and step away." The figure hesitated, then bolted down the alley, dropping the package in a loud thud. Officers immediately moved to secure it, and the bomb squad was called in for inspection. Inside the shop, everyone exhaled shakily. Amira whispered, "Why won't they leave us alone?" Mrs. Carter held her close. "Some people don't understand kindness or courage. They try to scare others because they fear change. But fear can never overpower courage and kindness when people choose to stand tall." The bomb squad carefully examined the package. Inside were more threatening notes and a small device. Though harmless, it was meant to intimidate and cause fear. Agent Price shook his head. "This is escalating. Whoever is behind this wants to push us to the edge, but they won't succeed. Not here. Not in this shop." Brenda's hands trembled as she whispered, I didn't know it would go this far. I'm trying to make things right." Mrs. Carter placed her hand on Brenda's shoulder. "Actions speak louder than mistakes. You're doing the right thing now. That counts for a lot." Amira looked around at everyone. Police, her mother, Mrs. Carter, Brenda, and Mr. Whitaker, and felt a surge of determination. Fear could not control her if she remained brave and kind. Just as everyone began to relax, the shop's bell jingled sharply. A young man, around 20, entered. His expression was nervous but resolute. I have something to confess," he said. "I know who's behind the threats." Agent Price immediately stepped forward. "Go on," he said, his voice firm. The young man nodded. "I'm part of the group that started all of this. I didn't mean for it to get this serious. It was supposed to be a prank, but it got out of control. I want to help stop it." Brenda's eyes widened. You were one of them?" "Yes," he admitted. "But I want to do the right thing now. I can give you information about the others, about what they're planning next." Mrs. Carter knelt beside Amira. "See, baby? Even people who make mistakes can choose the right path. Courage and kindness can inspire change." The young man provided details that helped the police increase surveillance and prevent potential dangers. The shop's security became tighter, and Maplewood slowly regained a sense of controlled safety. Amira felt a small sense of hope. The lessons she had learned about bravery and kindness were working. Even those who had tried to intimidate others could see the value of making the right choice. But just as the day seemed to settle, a commotion erupted outside. Another figure appeared near the park, moving quickly and carrying a package. The officers immediately approached, but the figure vanished into the shadows before they could reach it. Inside the shop, Amira clutched her backpack tightly. "They're still out there," she whispered. Mrs. Carter held her close. "Yes, baby. And that's why courage matters. Even when danger isn't gone, we keep standing. We keep doing what's right. That's what makes people stronger than fear." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets, Maplewood had survived another test. But the shadow of uncertainty remained, waiting patiently for its next opportunity. Amira looked at her kindness as free sign and felt a renewed determination. Fear might still linger outside, but it could not take away the courage, kindness, and hope she had worked so hard to share. Because the fight was not over, and someone, hidden in the darkness, patient and watching, was preparing for their next move. Maplewood woke to another gray morning, but this day felt heavier than the ones before. The air was thick, almost electric, as if the town itself was holding its breath. The events of the past weeks had left the community tense. Even the usual chatter in the streets and parks was subdued, replaced by whispers and anxious glances. Amira awoke early, clutching her pink backpack. Sleep had been restless. Shadows had crept into her dreams again, reminding her of the threats and suspicious packages. But she remembered Mrs. Carter's words about courage. It wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Her mother, Danielle, entered with a plate of toast. "Morning, baby," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Today we need to be careful. Stick together and everything will be okay." Amira nodded. I'll be brave, Mom. I can do this." Danielle smiled. "That's my girl. Bravery isn't about never being afraid. It's about what you do when you are afraid." By mid-morning, Creamy Delights was already buzzing with cautious energy. Police patrols were stationed on every corner, their presence visible and reassuring. Agent Price was back inside the shop, observing the scene and speaking quietly with officers stationed nearby. Inside, Mr. Whitaker moved behind the counter, cleaning with careful attention. Brenda stood beside him, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes filled with determination. She had learned the weight of fear and intimidation, and now she was committed to making amends for her past mistakes. Amira, Danielle, and Mrs. Carter entered the shop. Amira clutched her backpack tightly, her small hands shaking slightly as she scanned the room. "It feels heavy today," she whispered. Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. "Yes, baby. But even when it feels heavy, we keep moving forward. Courage shines brightest when things are hardest." For a while, the morning seemed calm. Customers came cautiously, some smiling, some anxious. The children outside played under the watchful eyes of officers stationed throughout the block. The soft music inside the shop added a sense of normalcy. Then, just before noon, the bell above the shop's door jingled sharply. Everyone looked up. A young woman stepped inside, her face partially hidden by a scarf. She didn't speak at first. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, and she seemed almost frozen in place. Agent Price immediately stood. "Please, ma'am, state your business." The young woman swallowed hard. I need to warn you. They're planning something bigger. I overheard them last night near the old warehouse on Maple Street. They're not stopping at threats anymore. They want to cause real harm. Brenda's hands trembled. Oh no! How do we stop them? Mrs. Carter placed a comforting hand on Brenda's shoulder. First, we stay calm. Panic will only make things worse. Next, we trust the people who are trained to handle this, and we act with courage and kindness in our hearts. Agent Price motioned for the young woman to come closer. Thank you for coming forward. We'll need a full statement, and your information could be crucial in preventing an incident. The woman nodded, her eyes wide with worry. I didn't want anyone else to get hurt. I saw what happened at the park, and I knew it could escalate. Amira stepped closer, clutching her backpack. So, you're helping us? She asked softly. The woman nodded. Yes, I want to do the right thing. Mrs. Carter smiled at Amira. See, baby, courage can inspire change, even in people who are afraid. The officers quickly organized a plan to investigate the warehouse, using the young woman's information. The neighborhood outside the shop was more secure than ever, with officers patrolling and blocking access to the streets surrounding the building. Despite the visible security, the tension inside the shop remained thick. Amira sat on a stool near the counter, watching the officers move with purpose. She realized that courage didn't remove fear, it allowed people to act despite it. Just as the shop began to regain a sense of calm, a loud crash erupted outside, followed by shouting. Everyone froze. What now? Brenda whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Agent Price grabbed his radio. All units, respond. Possible disturbance at the warehouse. Officers immediately moved toward the scene, leaving the shop quiet and tense. Inside, Amira's hands were clammy, and her heart pounded. Mrs. Carter held her close. Remember, baby, courage isn't about never being scared. It's about standing tall even when danger is near. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the distant shouts and sirens. Then, an officer returned holding a small envelope. It appears someone left this near the entrance of the warehouse. No immediate danger detected, but it's another warning. Brenda's hands shook. Why won't they stop? I've tried to do the right thing. I'm trying to make amends. Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. Sometimes people refuse to see the truth, but their refusal doesn't change who you are or the lessons you've learned. Amira looked at Brenda. You were brave before. You admitted your mistakes and tried to make things right. That counts for a lot. Brenda nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Thank you, Amira. That means more than you know. Outside, the officers inspected the envelope carefully. Inside were threatening notes, similar to the previous ones, along with sketches of the ice cream shop and instructions to avoid certain areas. The individual responsible was clearly becoming more organized and dangerous. Agent Price turned to Mr. Whitaker and Brenda. We need to remain vigilant. Whoever is behind this is escalating their threats, and we must identify them before they attempt anything worse. Mr. Whitaker nodded slowly. I understand, but closing the shop, it feels like letting fear win. Price's gaze was firm. Temporary precautions don't mean defeat. You've already inspired people here. That inspiration doesn't vanish because we're careful. The day continued with a tense calm. Customers returned to the shop, officers remained vigilant, and the community outside offered support. Amira noticed how everyone seemed to hold their breath, as if waiting for the next event to unfold. Then, as evening approached, a dark figure appeared in the park across the street, moving slowly but deliberately. The officers moved to intercept it, but the figure disappeared into the fading light. Inside the shop, Amira clutched her backpack tightly. They're still out there, she whispered. Mrs. Carter held her close. Yes, baby, and that's why courage matters. Even when danger isn't gone, we keep standing. We keep doing what's right. That's what makes people stronger than fear. Maplewood had survived another test, but the shadow of uncertainty still loomed. Someone, hidden and patient, was preparing for the next move. Amira looked at her kindness as free sign. Even with fear lurking outside, the lessons she had learned and shared could not be taken away. Courage, kindness, and hope remained. because the battle between fear and bravery was not over. And Maplewood's story was approaching its most critical moment. The morning in Maplewood broke with an uneasy silence. The sky was pale gray, and the streets seemed unusually empty. People peered cautiously from windows, and even the sounds of birds and children playing were muted. The town had survived days of tension, threats, and fear, but everyone knew the ultimate test was yet to come. Amira woke early, hugging her pink backpack tightly. She had barely slept, her dreams haunted by shadows and mysterious figures. But she remembered Mrs. Carter's words. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing tall even when your heart pounds with it. Her mother, Danielle, entered the room with a gentle smile. Good morning, baby. Today we need to be careful, but remember, you're brave, kind, and smart. That will keep us strong. Amira nodded, taking a deep breath. I can do this. I have to. By mid-morning, Creamy Delights was already buzzing with cautious activity. Police vehicles lined the streets, and officers patrolled every corner. Agent Price was back inside, speaking quietly with his team and keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. Mr. Whitaker moved behind the counter, cleaning with careful attention, while Brenda stood beside him, her hands trembling slightly but her eyes filled with determination. She had learned hard lessons about fear, mistakes, and the importance of doing the right thing, and she was committed to making amends. Amira entered with Danielle and Mrs. Carter. She scanned the room carefully, her heart racing. It feels heavy today, she whispered. Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. Yes, baby. But even when it feels heavy, we keep moving forward. Courage shines brightest when things are hardest. For a while, the morning seemed calm. Customers came cautiously, some smiling, some anxious. The children outside played under the watchful eyes of officers stationed throughout the streets. The soft music inside the shop added a sense of normalcy, a reminder that life could still carry moments of peace. But as the clock struck noon, a loud crash erupted outside, followed by shouting. Everyone froze. Agent Price grabbed his radio. All units, respond. Possible disturbance near the park. Officers immediately moved toward the scene. Inside, Amira clutched Mrs. Carter's hand tightly, her heart pounding. She felt fear, but she remembered that courage was acting despite it. From the shadows of the park, a figure appeared, moving quickly and deliberately. The officers followed, but the figure seemed to anticipate their movements, slipping behind trees and disappearing from sight before they could reach it. Inside the shop, Amira whispered, "They're still out there." Mrs. Carter held her close. "Yes, baby. But remember, fear does not control us. Courage and kindness do." Minutes later, one of the officers returned, holding a small envelope. "Another warning," he said. "No immediate danger detected, but they're escalating. Whoever is behind this wants to intimidate and control the town." Brenda's hands shook. I thought apologizing and trying to make things right would be enough. I didn't know it could go this far." Mrs. Carter knelt beside her. "Sometimes people refuse to see the truth, but that doesn't change who you are or the lessons you've learned. Your bravery matters, Brenda, more than you know." Amira looked at Brenda. "You've been brave. You admitted your mistakes and tried to make things right. That counts for a lot." Brenda nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you, Amira. That means everything." Agent Price carefully examined the envelope. Inside were threats, sketches of the shop, and instructions meant to intimidate the community. Whoever was behind this had become more organized, more dangerous, but the town was not backing down. "We need to increase security immediately," Price said firmly. "We must identify the individual or group responsible before they attempt anything worse." Mr. Whitaker nodded slowly. "I understand, but closing the shop completely, it feels like letting fear win." Price's gaze was firm. "Temporary precautions do not mean defeat. You've already inspired this town. That inspiration doesn't vanish because we're careful." The afternoon passed with tense vigilance. Customers returned cautiously, officers maintained close patrols, and the community rallied in support of Creamy Delights. Then, Just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Maplewood, a dark van appeared near the park across the street. A figure emerged carrying a small package. The officers moved quickly, but the figure vanished into the shadows before they could intercept it. Inside the shop, Amira clutched her backpack. "They're still out there," she whispered, fear and determination mingling in her small voice. Mrs. Carter held her close. "Yes, baby, and that's why courage matters. Even when danger isn't gone, we keep standing. We keep doing what's right. That's what makes people stronger than fear." Suddenly, the shop bell jingled. Everyone looked up. A young boy, about 8, stepped inside, holding a small envelope. I think this is for you, Amira," he said, his voice trembling. Amira opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of notes, each encouraging her to continue spreading kindness and bravery. Some were drawings, others messages, all saying the same thing. "Keep going. You are strong. Kindness wins." Tears filled her eyes. They want me to keep being brave?" Mrs. Carter nodded. "Yes, baby. Your actions inspire others, even when things are scary." Amira felt a surge of hope. Fear was real, but it could not overpower courage and kindness. Just then, Agent Price received a call on his radio. "All units, converge on the warehouse on Maple Street. Suspicious activity detected. Possible confrontation imminent." Everyone in the shop froze. The culmination of days of threats, fear, and courage had led to this moment. Amira's small hands tightened around her backpack straps. She realized that the final test of bravery and kindness was about to unfold. Outside, officers moved with precision and purpose, surrounding the warehouse. Inside Creamy Delights, Amira, her mother, Mrs. Carter, Brenda, and Mr. Whitaker waited, tense but ready, knowing that courage and kindness had brought them this far, and would carry them through whatever came next. The sun disappeared completely behind the horizon, leaving Maplewood in deep twilight. Shadows stretched across the streets. The figure responsible for the terror of the past days was still out there, but this time the town was prepared. Amira looked at her kindness is free sign. The letters glowed faintly in the lamplight, a symbol of everything she had learned, everything she had shared, and everything she had inspired. Fear might still lurk in the darkness, but courage, kindness, and hope would always shine brighter. Because in Maplewood, bravery had become a force stronger than threats. And tonight it would face its final challenge. Thank you for watching. If you found this story engaging, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective adds value to the conversation. To stay updated with future stories exploring themes of race, inequality, and the unexpected choices that shape lives, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful and thought-provoking content.